This is going to be 11.5, American Influence Grows. So this is going to be all about imperialism. So imperialism is going on at the same time as progressivism, so it's important to remember that these two things, although they sometimes seem to be sort of against each other, are interspersed as well. So let's start with our primary source. This is a quote from a song called Aloha Oe, meaning farewell to thee. This was a song written by the Queen of Hawaii, Queen Liliuokalani. I'm going to have to work on saying that correctly for the rest of this. She was the queen, but she also wrote songs, and farewell to thee, I think, is an interesting way of looking at the farewell to sort of Hawaiian self-rule and the coming of imperialism. So, our objectives: we are going to identify the key factors that caused America to want to take a greater role overseas. We're going to explain how the United States took its first steps towards the position of a world power and evaluate the acquisition of Hawaii by the United States. So, let's start with America coming onto the world stage. Throughout the 1800s and 1900s, a lot of very powerful nations were expanding thanks to the idea of imperialism. That basically, this is the idea that your country, being the best country, should expand your country, and you should extend your political power and military power and economic control all the way over to other countries and take over other countries. America had mostly kept inside the borders of America during this time, especially after the Civil War. We were kind of focused on Reconstruction and then rebuilding and then the Gilded Age and becoming powerful. But now, as we were expanding, we had to take this idea of imperialism into account. Should America be a nation that takes control of other nations? So here is a political cartoon of 10,000 miles from tip to tip. This is our imperial nation, not just the United States, but Puerto Rico and the Philippines back then. Now, one reason that people became imperialist countries, including America, was economic. We wanted the materials that other countries had, and the best way to get them is to take them over, and also that way they have to trade with you because you're the mother country now. Imperialist countries, you could move in, you could take over all the resources like tea and rubber, iron, oil, everything like that. You could remove them and ship them back to America at low, low prices. This is also known as being an extractive economy because we would extract the materials from these places. One of America's issues at the time was that we had way too many goods and nobody to trade with at the time. So we wanted to possibly start acquiring colonies as a way to not just take other goods, but to sell goods to other people. So again, if you are the mother country, you get to sell goods, and that country, the countries you take over are just going to have to buy them. Imperialism also ensured that any place we took over would only be allowed to trade with us. That would help us to and help our economy as well. We also had a couple other people arguing for imperialism. First of all, they thought that it was good to have a big military. And if America was going to expand, we needed a strong navy. Remember, we don't have an air force yet, so a navy is the most powerful thing. There's a military historian and a captain in the U.S. Navy named Alfred T. Mahan who wrote The Influence of Sea Power Upon History, and the thesis of his book was that America should expand our navy and should become imperial. His ideas really helped to influence America. We created a giant new navy during this time, so by 1900, we had the third largest navy in the world. So here's Alfred T. Mahan, who once said, "Americans must now begin to look outward. The growing production of the country demands it." Many other people also believe that we as Americans, and especially as white Americans, had a racial superiority. This was a belief at the time in what is known as social Darwinism, which is a term that we've used before in class. It's the idea, somebody took Darwin's evolutionary ideas of, evolution and survival of the fittest and decided that, well, since white people are the strongest and the fittest and the richest in America, that means that we're built better than other people. So America took colonies as a way to civilize and enlighten people and bring our light over to them. The famous poet Rudyard Kipling wrote a poem called The White Man's Burden, which is all about this idea of taking over other nations in order to civilize them. So here is a political cartoon called School Begins from 1899. We see Uncle Sam, America as the teacher, and Cuba and Puerto Rico and Hawaii and many of our new colonies are up front misbehaving, while the good students, the good states in the back, are reading quietly. I think it's also interesting that we see an African American not being allowed to be a part of class on the far left, the Native Americans in the corner, and the Chinese American is standing outside, not being able to make it past the gate. Now, this all ties in with America's view of itself as exceptional, the city upon a hill, the chosen people, the idea of manifest destiny, that God wants us to expand. And it also ties in with later ideas of this from a guy named Frederick Jackson Turner, who is a historian. He wrote a paper called The Significance of the Frontier in American History. And his thesis statement for this paper was that what made America great and what made us exceptional and what made us work well was that we kept conquering West. We kept pushing that frontier, and that's what made us strong. That's what made us a powerful nation. And now that we had conquered the West, we needed to keep conquering and keep expanding and push beyond our own borders if necessary. So here's Frederick Jackson Turner, here's his thesis. Up to our own day, American history has been, in a large degree, the history of the colonization of the Great West. And he said, now we got to keep going. So America began to grow. In 1853, Commodore Matthew Perry took a fleet of American warships to Japan, not to conquer it, but just to kind of interact with Japan. When the Japanese emperor saw what America looked like these days, he started to open up trade with America, and Japan and America would trade with each other. They would Japan started to modernize in a big way during this time. In 1867, America took over the Midway Islands in the Pacific and started to increase trade with the Kingdom of Hawaii, which is in the middle of the Pacific as well. That included building an American naval base in Pearl Harbor in Hawaii. So here is Matthew Perry, and here is Commodore Matthew Perry, who said, "The Japanese are remarkable for their inordinate curiosity." Now, in 1867, William Seward, the Secretary of State, bought Alaska from Russia, which was something that he thought was important because it sort of helped expand America. It also kept Russia from expanding. And a lot of people thought it was not the world's best idea until they realized that it doubled the size of our country. And also, they eventually found that Alaska is full of great natural resources like wood and oil and gold, things that we cared very much about. By the 1880s, with the Klondike Gold Rush, people started to fill into places like Anchorage and other cities in Alaska. Eventually, Alaska would become a state in 1959. So here's how big Alaska actually is. It's quite large. Biggest state in the country. Many Americans also saw Central and South America as a possible next step for expansion, that, we should expand into Mexico and Central America and South America. Some even said we should colonize down there and not just trade. The Secretary of State, a guy named James Blaine, got the Latin American countries to at least agree to the idea of a Pan-American highway, which is the idea that we should have a large road that starts in Canada, goes through the United States, and goes all the way to the tip of South America. So here is the Pan-American highway as it is today, and we can see that this still is around up through today. Lastly, let's look at Hawaii, speaking of American expansion. By the 1890s, America and Hawaii had been linked for decades by business. Like I said, we had bought Pearl Harbor. We had many Americans living there. It was a stopping point between California and Asia. It was a place for us to refuel. But also, it had many sugarcane plantations where many Americans had settled in order to make sugar. Sugar was very important back then. Everybody wanted it. We were addicted to sugar back in the late 1800s, early 1900s. Luckily, nothing like today, of course. Now, white planters forced the king of Hawaii, King Kalakaua, to amend the Constitution in 1887 so that only basically the rich white American landowners could vote. They literally did this at gunpoint, too. This is called the Bayonet Revolution, and it was all about sugar. Now, in 1891, when the king died, his successor, Queen Liliuokalani, I believe his sister, took on the throne. Now, Queen Liliuokalani, which is a name that I really like to say, it's very fun to say, she was a nationalist. She believed that Hawaii should be for Hawaiians, that it belonged to Native Hawaiians, that they should have the most power. And this was a problem for the white landowners who had just sort of forced her brother to sign off on certain ways of life and ways of governing. There was also a large tax on Hawaiian sugar at this time, which impacted the white planter economy, so this led to a planter-led revolution in Hawaii. This, by the way, is Hawaii. And here is Queen Liliuokalani. She was alive from 1838 to 1917 from Hawaii. She was the Queen of Hawaii from 1891 to 1893 and was the last royal ruler of Hawaii. After a supposed coup attempt where they alleged that she tried to take over the country, she was arrested and imprisoned in a very nice prison. It was a nice house, but it was a prison. She was not allowed to leave. She spent the rest of her life fighting for Hawaiian independence, trying to get her land back from the whites who took it, and writing traditional Hawaiian stories and songs, including the one that we started with, the song Aloha Oi, Farewell to Thee. Now, after the Queen got rid of the white planter-written constitution, the rich planters responded by basically taking over. They were led by a man named Sanford Dole. Sanford Dole was one of the leaders of this group of people who took over Hawaii. And very quickly after taking over, he asked Benjamin Harrison, the president, to take over possession. However, this would not happen for several years because a lot of these presidents were sort of uncomfortable with the idea of America becoming an imperialist nation. By the way, Sanford's, I believe it's not his brother, it's his cousin, James Dole, was the founder of the Dole Fruit Company as well. So here is Sanford Dole with a very nice beard, 1844 to 1926. Born in the Kingdom of Hawaii, where he was a lawyer. He later became a Supreme Court justice in the Kingdom of Hawaii. He was a governor of the Hawaiian Territory after the Revolution, and the president of Hawaii after it succeeded. His cousin, I meant to say, was James Dole, the president of Dole Foods. Now, like I said, the Senate was, at first, not everybody was really willing to jump on board with the whole idea of imperialism. The people who were against it basically said, look, America was a country that was formed out of a revolution against imperialism. We did not want to be a colony of Great Britain, so how can we, with a straight face, say that we are going to become a colonizing nation? Grover Cleveland refused to annex Hawaii as well when he discovered that most Hawaiians didn't approve of it. However, after the Spanish-American War broke out in 1898, which we're going to get to soon, William McKinley decided it would be better to have Hawaii as a place to stop on our way to Asia. We were also worried that somebody else might take it too, and so we took Hawaii as a U.S. territory in 1898, and it would later become a state in 1959.